Alana Barron. Welcome to the Post-Pandemic Pivot Summit. So great to have you with us today.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for including me.
Well, we are the lucky ones. And let me just make a little brief introduction about you. So people who are new to you get to know a little bit before we engage in our conversation. So Alana, you're an award-winning business writing and editor with 20 years of experience in capturing how technology is changing the way people work and live. And you own your own media company, Cochituate. I hope I pronounce it right. And if not, you will correct my pronunciation, where you provide writing, editing, and editorial strategy services to corporations and nonprofits. So welcome to the Post-Pandemic Pivot Summit. So excited to talk to you today.
Thank you.
So I have a ton of questions for you. You are indeed the type of person that it's a reflection of the audience that we have today. As you know, most of the people listening to us today are entrepreneurs that either had jumped into entrepreneurship as a result of the pandemic, either by choice or need, and are just, building their first steps into building a sustainable business. You are a very successful entrepreneur. So I'm curious, how did your journey start into entrepreneurship?
So I grew up near Boston, and I am from a family that has some entrepreneurs. My grandmother started her own wholesale bakery when she was in her late 30s or early 40s. And when I was a kid, my father worked for a startup. So it's, I feel like it was kind of always there in my DNA that, that I would start a business someday.
And tell us, you have been doing this now for 20 years, very successfully. If you had to start all over today, what are 3 things that you will do differently?
So I started my own business just about 10 years ago. And before that, I worked for almost 20 years as a journalist, and primarily covering technology, not just the technology industry, but how businesses use technology. I started out covering technology policy in Congress in Washington, D.C. That was my first I'd say big reporting job, and I was focused on policy and legislation. And I transitioned into writing about businesses and leadership and innovation because that's where my interest took me. At a point about 10 years ago, I had been in my current role for 5 years or so. I was ready to make a move, but I had this realization that I didn't really want to take the next conventional step up the ladder. And I had always thought about freelancing and starting my own business. I had done a little bit of freelancing here and there. And right around that time, the after-school babysitter we had finished her degree, and she was looking for a career job. And the kids were in middle school or almost in middle school. And we thought, you know what, maybe we can get by for a couple years. I can work part-time, build a client base, and just be home for the kids. And so I took the leap.
So, thinking back, so many people, it's so interesting. Your story, it really fits with so many people, right? That jumps into entrepreneurship, especially women. And during those first years, how did you already have a little bit of clients that you were working with? How did you start expanding to build a network and, a presence for you?
So, the thing that was successful for me particularly was talking to all the people I knew and all the people that I had worked with in the past. It happened that the industry that I was in, the journalism industry, was going through a lot of churn, and still is to some extent. But a lot of people, as magazines and newspapers started consolidating, and moving a lot of the work online. People left their jobs or took buyouts and went to do different things. So there were a lot of former colleagues that I had who were working in companies, either other other sort of online magazines or online newspapers, or in marketing departments where they were producing a lot of content. And so, I got in touch with people that I knew and told them that I was available. And over time, they found reasons to hire me.
So it's interesting what you're saying, because we may think that the world is changing so dramatically lately, and we need to come up with new ideas. But in reality, we are facing the very same issues that you just described. Many people are leaving their jobs. Jobs are moving online. There's companies that are seeking support in a variety of industries. So it sounds like we can still apply the very same strategies that you apply when you're starting your business to today. I mean, of course, we have the advantage of having social media, but in reality, it seems like the job market and the work is going through the very same evolution, if you will, even though many years have passed, 10 years has passed since you started your own business.
I think that there are lots of new kinds of jobs emerging, certainly driven by the introduction of, artificial intelligence and some other related technologies. And so some people's jobs that weren't automated before are being automated or disintermediated. And there are some people who will need to adapt and learn new skills. And, and starting a business is one option. I think that for a lot of people, there are skills they have that they can turn into a freelance business. There are a lot of companies, and this is what happened in journalism. Newspapers and magazines, laid off a lot of reporters and editors, reduced their full-time staff, but they still needed people to produce content. And so there was work available. And at the same time, a lot of companies discovered brand journalism. And so there was a need for those skills, in companies that wanted to produce, feature articles about trends that their customers were interested in, and other kinds of content that you see all over. So I think that's the case in other industries also, that your specific job might go away, it might be outsourced, or you just might not want to do it anymore, but you can take the skills that you've acquired over, however many years of your career and find a way to market those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, literally, that's the life that we are all living, nowadays. It's interesting how like this big revolution of people leaving jobs is taking so much momentum. And I think, yeah, lots of people are looking to transfer their skills into sustainable business that they could run themselves. So tell us a little bit about, if you were to have to start all over again, looking back in your own strategy, what are some things that you will do differently?
So there are a couple of things. One thing is that I think I would have spent a little more time upfront thinking about what kinds of clients would be the best fit for me. At the beginning, I think, coming off having worked for my whole career for a company with a predictable salary, I think my first instinct was, well, I have to make money. And so, I worked for some clients. I picked up some projects that weren't probably the best fit for me in terms of, where I wanted to focus. And, and they were great clients. There was nothing wrong with them or the relationship, and the work was perfectly legitimate work. But it wasn't the work that I really wanted to do. And, it didn't deliver the value for me in terms of, time and effort that I was looking for, what my goals were. So, so I think I would have spent a little more time at the beginning thinking about, is this really the client that I want, or is there somebody else who is really better to serve that client, and and I should focus elsewhere. So that's one thing. Another thing is that I think I would have, looking back, I think I could have taken some more risks than I did early on. There were some ideas that I had that I didn't feel like I had 100% of the expertise that I needed to really pull them off. And I was concerned about putting a lot of time and effort into something that wasn't going to pan out. And some of those ideas have kind of nagged at me, which makes me think that, they would have been successful. And I think it's not too late to pursue them. I think at some point that I will, but, maybe I could have started on those earlier than I have.
It's interesting. So I hear like giving us the space to find our voice, like define what is it that we really want and will bring satisfaction into our lives, might be good advice for us. And then don't be afraid to take risk. I guess we took the biggest risk by leaving our careers and starting our jobs, but you're right. When you're leaving a job where you have that predictable salary, you're solely focused. So the majority of the energy goes into, oh my God, I got to replace that income right now. And you kind of like could create some roadblocks for our own growth as an entrepreneur. That's so true.
I think that's absolutely right. And, and another thing I'll say is at the same time, you're trying to, to build your business and get all those clients and, and make as much money as you can to, and to at least reach your goals, that you also want to protect your time. One thing that took me a while to learn was how to negotiate deadlines with clients. I think my first, my instinct, and I think a lot of people's instincts, if you're in a service business, is to say, well, when do you need this? Sure, I can do that. And, and that, and we define that as great service, which it is. But on the other hand, you need time to do things like, send out your invoices and take a vacation. And, and if you have people in your life who you want to spend time with, you have to make sure that you're not working all the time. So, I think it took until I had, there was one vacation where I worked every evening because I had a deadline for a client and I was not smart enough to tell them, you know what, I can't deliver it during this period because, I'm going to be on vacation with my family. And I think if I'd pushed back a little, they probably would have said fine. But I didn't. And, my whole family was upset with me. So
I am sure. It's so, yes, we are so eager. That's really good advice because I think about my own experience, right? In the beginning, you're so eager to care for that client because you don't know perhaps where your next client is going to come in, or you're just building a presence for yourself in a new arena. But you're right. If you don't create a presence for yourself and a voice for yourself, then it will be harder and harder to carve the space.
Burn out. So.
And ultimately, we chose to start a business to have the time with our families and the freedom that we all seek. So it comes so naturally for you, right? Because you've been doing this for such a long time that you're like, yes, those are things that I will do differently now. But you just say something very interesting. You are a solopreneur. So I am curious, how do you're a solopreneur with a thriving company. So how do you now manage to do everything as a CEO of your company and as a solopreneur, and as you have this growing company? How do you manage all the aspects in your company?
So one thing is I don't actually do absolutely everything myself. there are things that I don't know how to do. And there are things that I'm just not as good at as someone else, or who, or who it would make sense to outsource to, because I can use that time, in a more valuable way. So for example, I would never do my own taxes.
Yeah, neither would I.
Right. So, and and there are some projects for which I use a research assistant, because even though I love doing my own research and I've been doing it for years, there's a lot of value added to, to having somebody, do that for me, because, I can dedicate that time to interacting directly with my clients, or, working on writing, other articles or reports while the research is being done. And it's a better use of my time.
Yeah, so another awesome lesson, right? So for us to succeed as solopreneurs, we need to recognize where our time could be invested and has the biggest lever. And we often have that challenge of making a decision about is it okay to also outsource our services? But it sounds that your advice is like focusing where you're best at, and
Yeah.
then outsource what you don't know how to do, so then somebody else could do it and you could move forward.
Exactly. And, and the other thing I'd say is invest in some good tools, financial management tools, project management tools, productivity, CRM, whatever your business needs to keep you organized and, on top of all the information that you have and the projects that you have. And so you understand where your money is coming from and where it's going. I've used a lot of free versions of things to figure out, is this a good tool? Somebody will say, oh, I love such and such. And so I'll check it out, and, and sometimes it's good, and I will decide to buy the premium version, because, it has the additional features that are really going to help me. So, you can't, a lot of free tools go only so far. And, if you're making money, you shouldn't be afraid to, spend some of it to make your life easier and help your business run better, especially if you are doing it solo.
Yeah, the great thing, there's nothing more distracting than my phone ringing in the back. I'm so sorry about that. But what I hear you say also is that don't be afraid to test out. So you didn't commit to immediately buying all these software or tools, rather you test them out. And it's okay to test out free versions until you find the piece of the tool that best serves your personal needs.
And I found that changes over time also. I was using one project management tool for a long time, and I was really pushing the edges of what I could do with it. And, and recently I found something that is working a lot better for me. And, and I actually bought it right away, because I knew somebody who was using it, and, sort of gave me kind of a rundown of how he uses it. And, and it was really clear that it was going to be a good thing for me.
So it sounds there's another great piece of advice that you're just sharing with us right now. You, even though you're a solopreneur, you keep up with your network of other people. So I guess my question would be, how do you as a solopreneur make time to connect with other professionals, either in your same industry or, continue building those relationships?
So before COVID, I would try to go to one event a year where I could meet some people who, might be prospective clients. And also, and since, and since COVID, I have been active in some online groups of entrepreneurs and also writers and editors. So, so people who can I can sort of trade advice and, and get information about just how to run my business better. And in some cases, connect with people who need my services. Um, and just be able to learn from other people, which is, I think part of what good networking is, is connecting with people who you can learn from and learn more about, how you can serve them better.
Yeah, so that's so valuable. It's so interesting how our world has changed dramatically since COVID, but in a way, it has eased many of the barriers of connecting with others, via Zoom or groups, as you described, just as we're doing today. So Elena, there's one topic that I really wanted to talk to you about. You published this phenomenal book, and I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about it, because I think it's right for this audience.
Okay, so the book is The Ultimate Side Hustle Book, 450 Money-Making Ideas for the Gig Economy. And I wrote it a couple of years ago after I was approached by an editor who knew that I was working, working on a lot of articles about the future of work. And most of the material that I write and edit is from the corporate perspective, looking at employees and contract workers and the impact of technology on recruitment and retention and HR generally. And I thought this would be a really great opportunity to look at the gig economy and the future of work from the other side of the table, from the ground level, just finding out how technology was changing the way people found work and the new opportunities that they might have.
Well, I think you mentioned that you wrote it a few years ago, but today it's even more important than ever. Just as we have discussed earlier, so many people are either creating a side hustle or growing their side hustle to build a full-time business. So I think that your book is really timely, and I'm sure it will inform and help a lot of people to think about what are some options from where they are and how to grow their own side hustle into a full-time business.
I hope it does. There were some statistics that came out a few months ago, maybe, of businesses that had started during the pandemic, and toward the middle quarter, third quarter of 2020, there was a big spike in new business creation, and a lot of those businesses appear to have been solo businesses. So, it's hard to know for sure, but it's reasonable to think that those were people who decided to take a side hustle and turn it into a full-time job.
Absolutely.
Or maybe keep it as a side hustle, but they formed an actual business.
Yeah, it is so timely. I have a question about just how did you came up with the name for your media company, and how do you pronounce it correctly? Because it's so interesting.
It's Cochituate Media, and it's named after a lake that's at the end of my street.
Oh, really? So interesting. Yeah. It is a beautiful name. I mean, once you hear it, you will never forget it because it's so unique. So Elena, tell us, how can we stay in touch with you if we wanted to learn more about your work or about your company?
So I have an author Facebook page that's under my name, where I occasionally post about my book, The Ultimate Side Hustle Book, 450 Money-Making Ideas for the Gig Economy. And I have a website with a contact form. People can always get in touch with me that way.
So,
media.com.
Both will be listed underneath your video, so people can immediately connect with you via those two options. I just want to thank you so much for all the information you share with us today. You really have put us in a space where, as solo entrepreneurs or even new entrepreneurs, we could see ourselves in your successful steps, and hope that we get there.
It's been a pleasure, and I hope I've been able to help someone.
I'm sure you have. Thank you so much.